Canada is known for its vast, beautiful landscapes and reputation as one of the most desirable places to live and visit. However, for Canadians and tourists alike, flying within this North American country often comes with a hefty price tag. Airfare in Canada is notoriously high compared to other countries, leaving many travelers frustrated and seeking answers. For example, according to the newest available official statistics, the average fare for domestic flights was 177 Canadian dollars, one way, at least in 2019, and we know what happened after that. So if you've ever wondered why flying in Canada is so expensive, you're not alone. And actually, there are multiple factors contributing to this issue. Now let's see the reasons behind the sky-high flying costs, as there are quite a few. The first reason for expensive air travel in Canada is, of course, geography. Canada is the second largest country in the world by landmass, with major cities spread far apart. Whether you're traveling from Vancouver to Toronto or Halifax to Calgary, the distances are immense. Covering such vast distances requires more fuel, more time, and greater operational costs. Unlike Europe, where you can cross borders in an hour or two, traveling between major Canadian cities can be compared to flying across multiple European countries and takes hours. Additionally, with fewer major cities to connect, there are fewer opportunities for competition among airlines, resulting in higher prices for consumers because the numbers of passengers flying between them are simply smaller than in, for example, the USA. Competition, or rather, the lack of it, also plays a significant role in driving up the cost of air travel. Canada has only two dominant airlines, Air Canada and WestJet, which control a large portion of the domestic market. This duopoly limits the competition that might otherwise help lower prices. While there have been attempts to introduce more low-cost carriers into the market, the reality is that they have struggled to survive in such a competitive and costly environment. For example, ultra-low-cost carriers such as Flair Airlines and Lynx Air have tried to break through, but they face significant hurdles. Lynx Air already failed, and the same happened, only a few weeks ago, to Canada Jetlines. The government's regulatory framework and infrastructure costs make it challenging for these smaller players to stay afloat, leaving the market dominated by the two big airlines. With fewer airlines to choose from, travelers have limited options, and the airlines can maintain higher prices without much pushback, unlike in Europe and Canada's southern neighbor. The regulatory environment in Canada is another major factor contributing to high airfares. The Canadian government imposes numerous fees and taxes on airlines, which are often passed on to the passengers. These include airport improvement fees, fuel surcharges, security fees, and more. While some of these fees are common in other countries, the overall cost burden on Canadian airlines is significantly higher. The federal and provincial governments have also been criticized for not doing enough to open the market to more competition, which could help bring prices down. There is a lack of political will to challenge the existing framework, and this stagnation results in high operational costs that airlines have no choice but to pass on to travelers. And there we come to one of the most important factors, the airport infrastructure cost. Airport infrastructure costs in Canada are also disproportionately high compared to other countries. Canadian airports are operated by non-profit authorities, which are responsible for covering their own costs, including maintenance, improvements, and expansions. To do so, airports charge airlines significant fees, which in turn drive up ticket prices. For instance, airports like Toronto Pearson International are notorious for having some of the highest landing fees in the world. While these fees are necessary for the upkeep of the airports, they add to the already substantial cost of flying in Canada. In comparison, many international airports receive government subsidies or are partially government-owned, which helps to keep costs lower for airlines and passengers. This happens especially in Europe, and that's why Ryanair is so successful. Another contributing factor is the size and density of Canada's population. While Canada is vast, its population is relatively small, with around 39 million people. Most of the population is concentrated in a handful of urban centers, which means fewer passengers are flying between smaller or remote cities. The low population density in these areas makes it harder for airlines to maintain profitability on less popular routes, so they raise prices to cover the cost of flying to and from these locations. This also explains why some routes are underserved, with few or no direct flights, forcing travelers to take more expensive, longer routes with multiple connections. Additionally, ultra-low-cost air travel models that work well in other countries don't easily translate to Canada. Many Canadians wonder why airlines like Ryanair and WestJet can offer cheap flights across Europe, while similar models struggle in Canada. The answer lies partly in the regulatory environment, but also in the scale of operations and differences in market conditions. European low-cost carriers benefit from dense populations, short distances, and fewer regulatory barriers. In Canada, however, operating costs are higher due to factors such as the large distances between cities, harsh weather conditions, and government-imposed fees. While some ultra-low-cost carriers have attempted to establish themselves in Canada, they often face financial difficulties, forcing them to either raise prices or shut down. Since 2020, the pandemic decimated the travel industry worldwide, and Canadian airlines were no exception. Airlines faced steep losses and drastically reduced their flight offerings. Now, the world seems to have recovered from the pandemic, and airlines have slowly restored previous levels of service. However, decreased in-flight availability remains in some cases, further driving up ticket prices due to limited supply. Additionally, airlines are still working to recover financially from the losses they endured during the pandemic, and this has contributed to maintaining higher prices as they attempt to stabilize their operations. For travelers hoping to find cheaper airfare within Canada, the prospects may seem bleak, but there is some hope. The Canadian government has acknowledged the high cost of air travel and is exploring potential reforms to introduce more competition and lower fees. However, I'm very skeptical in this case. The development of more efficient aircraft and advancements in technology could help reduce operational costs for airlines in the long run, which could eventually result in lower ticket prices for consumers. However, these changes are unlikely to happen overnight and will take years. In the meantime, savvy travelers can still find ways to minimize costs. While simple advice as being flexible with travel dates, booking in advance, and keeping an eye out for sales or promotions are unlikely to significantly lower the flight cost. Signing up for airline loyalty programs and using travel reward credit cards can help a little bit, as Air Canada offers a pretty good loyalty program. Booking a ticket for miles can at least provide some relief to those looking to explore this beautiful country without breaking the bank. Flying in Canada is expensive due to a combination of factors, including geography, lack of competition, high regulatory fees, airport costs, and low population density. While there are efforts to address these challenges, significant change will take time. Until then, travelers will need to navigate the complex landscape of Canadian air travel and utilize whatever strategies they can to make flying more affordable. While the cost of air travel in Canada may be high, the country's breathtaking scenery and vibrant cities make it worth the journey.